So that's what I'm saying. The text is like an object. It's gonna change perspective based on where you're standing.
I don't know.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I missed you, baby sweet. It was a day.
It was a day.
Please tell me you're seeing this too.
From Seattle, we're Drinking the Movies. I'm Taylor Baker.
And I'm Michael Clausen.
Oh, hi, Michael.
Hello, Taylor, and welcome back to Drink in the Movies.
Oh, thanks. I needed the intro. What are we doing?
I just like to welcome
Drinking
you back to the show.
Movies? So this is our first kind of normal episode we've recorded this year, at least when we weren't in the fugue state of the holidays and binge watching things to make our top 10 list of the year. A little bit of housekeeping is in order. Is there anything you want to tell the folks they can expect coming changes or a little bit more strategic changes on our end this year?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things we'll be trying out this year. One is we'll be a little bit more focused on classics than I think we have been in the past 12 months, just out of an interest in digging into directors and categories of films of interest.
Yeah, I think that specifically the Criterion channel might play a little bit larger role than I'd expected. We are going to be covering The Steel Helmet and The Naked Kiss, both of which were on the Criterion channel. I signed up for a free trial and quickly became delighted by their selection offerings. So I think we might be doing some programming based specifically on the Criterion channel. So any listeners that haven't looked at it, there is a free 14-day trial that you could sign up for to watch some of the titles we'll review later in the show, and maybe consider getting a year subscription to them, because we will be covering a lot of stuff that they'll have. Some stuff they won't have, but I'm excited to get back to kind of the meat that we started the show with, which was classic films.
And to be clear, we are not sponsored by Criterion. We just dig it.
Yes. Their prints of films are second to none. I really like some of the Janus restorations as well, but there's nothing quite like a Criterion restoration. And all the other subsequent information they have attached to their files. Additionally, we'll be expanding the show a little bit to include some interviews. We have some lined up with some filmmakers that we're really excited about. The first one should be coming out by the end of January, and then we'll be booking and recording the subsequent interviews with some very, very talented filmmakers. Primarily, we're looking at some documentarians that we'll also have covered on the show in their most recent projects in Doc Talk. We might have another documentary filmmaker who's of great notoriety who doesn't have a documentary coming out for some time. So we're really excited about that, and that'll hopefully all shape together here in the next 6 months.
Lots of good stuff to come, but today is a pretty ordinary episode of Drink in the Movies. We have a couple classics to review as well as a new release. What's our new release for today?
Unfortunately, our new release is called 1917 from Sam Mendes and the genius savant Roger Deakins.
There's a little hint about how we feel about it. Additionally, we'll be covering two films from director Sam Fuller. Very fortunately, one being The Steel Helmet, as you mentioned, as well as The Naked Kiss. Let's dive in. But first impressions. What are we doing first impressions of today?
First impressions today are a A24 double feature. We'll be looking at Saint Maud, and then we'll be looking at Kelly Reichardt's First Cow. I think both of these are female filmmakers, so it's a nice, refreshing way to start the year.
Let's take a look at Saint Maud first.
It takes nothing special to mop up after the dying.
You're prettier than the last one.
But to save a soul, that's quite something.
Bless Amanda's body and bless her mind, which is shrouded in darkness.
When you pray, do you get a response?
Oh, it's like he's physically in me. It's how he guides me.
All right, Michael, that was the trailer for Saint Maud from writer-director Rose Glass, who I've never heard of. What do you think?
I have never heard of Baroa's Glass either. I think this looks pretty cool. A24 is also just really good at making catchy commercials that sometimes it feels like a little hard to tell what like the real meat or tone of it is. Sometimes I feel like I'm just reacting to the trailer itself and the marketing of it. It's pretty catchy marketing. It's probably going to get me in the door. And I think I like most of what I see. But I don't know that I could even describe the tone very well because I feel like I'm mostly just feeling the marketing effort here. But I don't know. I'm still pumped. What about you?
I would agree. I think for me, I picked up on the tone a little bit more. It definitely feels like a psychological thriller in the religious genre, or a religion-based psychological thriller where I'm not too sure what exactly the relationship is between Maud and this cancer patient. I assume this blonde woman or the bald woman who we start the trailer with, her caring for, and by the end of the trailer, she's mocking her, and reality seems to be distorted. So I'm definitely interested. I really liked some of the cinematography we saw in the middle there during the outside, or in the outside at night on the street. That looked a little slick to me, kind of a softy vibe of the city, which is always cool. I'm definitely up for it and excited that spring has a release that promising.
Absolutely. Comes out on March 27th. Looks like it is a directorial debut, feature length at least. So,
oh, wow.
Cool stuff.
Very cool. Okay, so we've already got an early frontrunner for directorial debut of the year.
We'll see what happens.
On to First Cow.
It's the getting started that's the puzzle. No way for a poor man to start.
You have a cow.
First cow in the territory.
This ain't a place for cows.
Well, it's no place for white men either.
I sense opportunity here.
All right, we just watched the trailer for Kelly Reichardt's First Cow. What is your first impression?
My first impression is joy and excitement. Kelly Reichardt has one of the strongest voices for North American storytelling that I can think of. She particularly lives in the Wild West era, which I can't really give a range of dates to, but I can say since English ships landed here to when we began to use metal devices to transport ourselves, that range of time is really where she exists with the loudest and most impressive voice among filmmakers. And this is right in that little area. It's in nature. It's got great character actors supporting it, and I'm completely along for the ride and don't quite know what to expect other than to leave expectations at the door and walk in open-minded.
I think I agree with you pretty much on all fronts. I love Kelly Reichardt. I expect her to be coming up when we do our favorites of the decade next week. I agree. I think she has a really interesting perspective on American history. At first glance, the movies are kind of small, but all of them really just kind of stick with me in unexpected ways. And I think she has a really painterly eye for composition, a real kind of empathy for her characters and their struggles. And this looks like it is very characteristic of all those things I really like about her work. So I am very pumped.
Agreed. I think that we'll be covering this film and possibly some of her early films whenever First Cow does come out. On to 1917.
We need to keep moving! Come on!
You can't possibly make it that way, man! You bloody insane!
Why in God's name did you have to choose me?
Alright, let me give you my one take here. Nope, we're done. Ready to move on?
We're going to try to do this with no edits?
I don't think so.
Come on. I'm trying to save you some of the editing work. In case listeners don't know, Taylor is very graciously the editor of our podcast. I can't interest you in letting this be an edit-free episode.
It's not going to happen. Now, if we could limit it to 4 stitches, like 1917 itself, that would be quite impressive, but I really suspect not.
So we're pro-editing. That's what it sounds like.
I'm definitely pro-editing, because if I wasn't, then I would probably commit suicide with our show. So, yeah, I'm certainly pro-editing.
Me too. If only listeners knew how much of what I say is cut out of this show.
I don't think they need to know.
No, they don't. Now they do. Sounds like you didn't like it so much. 1917. Directed by Sam Mendes.
A little bit less than you, I suspect. I think we both gave it a 3. I'm middle of the road on my 3. Like, it's barely a 76, not a 74. I could easily bump it down to 2.5 and feel like that's not harsh enough. I felt nothing for this film besides respect for the physical prowess used by every person to make it. But as far as storytelling goes, I have nothing but the meanest, harshest criticisms for it.
Coming out of the gates hot. I'm with you. I did not care for this film at all, really. It's kind of 2 thumbs down for me. I think it's technically accomplished, right? I don't know that anyone is going to disagree about that. For me, the technical proficiency was counterproductive in a very meaningful way to what this story is.
Agreed.
So anyone who is not familiar with 1917 is shot to look as if it were in a continuous take for the entire length of the film. To me, it felt completely detached from the perspective of the characters. It calls attention to detail and movement in a way that excludes me from the picture and really deprives it of spontaneity and possibility. All I can concentrate on is how predetermined this all feels, which sometimes feels very kind of icky when it's drawing attention to, the bodies that these 2 British soldiers are constantly coming in contact with.
The dead bodies.
Correct. Yeah. All I can really think about is the crew placing this body part and that structure here the whole way through. I was not involved in this story. I would not recommend it, but it is nominated for Best Picture, so...
And Best Director?
I believe that's correct.
One major criticism that I have that might not hold up, I haven't done any math, and I never plan to rewatch this film, to be honest, is I agree that it seems like it's one take, but if you take one moment to think about where they start and where they end, it makes no sense in one quote-unquote take for me to start on one side of a battlefield and end up on another totally different side after I've gone through a city. Like, I know that it's quote-unquote in one take and that we're seeing him every step of the way, but the distances just don't equal the time that we're spending with him. I know how fast that truck could go while he was in it, while it was loaded down with all those people. It just makes no sense for them to have gotten that far. Does it?
That seems very likely that some things maybe just don't compute.
Yeah, and as far as a war film, that is one of my favorite genres of film. I know that the real genre, I guess, is called sword and sandal, but my favorite films growing up were sword and sandal war films like Troy and Gladiator and Kingdom of Heaven. I also really like Saving Private Ryan, Black Hawk Down, those types of things. I care less about the jarhead side of stuff, but I still respect that side of filmmaking. They sacrificed everything that is great about the companionship war film to make this film. They didn't have anything to me that felt harrowing, because the harrowing scene that happens at the very end, I've already seen about 180,000 times before a movie started in the movie theater this last year. The final sequence is the most seen sequence of the film in the trailers, which is a terrible decision. Blade Runner 2049, hot take, is one of my favorite films of the decade. Cinematography by Roger Deakins. I think it has some of the best compositions I've ever seen in my whole life. When I think about cinematography, I think about certain scenes from that movie to describe what it can do. There's not one scene from this movie that I say that about.
I paused to think about if there was anything really positive I had to say about this movie. I don't know that I have a whole lot. I think the cinematography is impressive. I just kept thinking about, I think it was Sidney Lumet who said, don't let the difficulty involved in getting a shot let you think that shot is any good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think this is sort of the, perfect example of that. And I think what this movie has to say about the horror of war is not something that the form is really helping to demonstrate, particularly in the climax where the British soldier we're left with is, charging across a field, and the shot, anyone who has seen the trailer will be familiar with, the kind of triumphant note of it, I think, is just really sort of clashing with the idea that any of this is so awful to be involved with. I don't know. I think the movie we're going to talk about later in this episode, The Steel Helmet, and how that movie deals with how truly terrible and grueling war is something that this movie is really kind of falsely interested in.
Yeah. And Steel Helmet does like 9 other things too, which are fascinating. Not to mention how Sam Fuller incorporates children into his films, which is a separate conversation that I'm very excited to have. Sam Mendes is a very competent director. Roger Deakins is perhaps the best cinematographer still alive. I might have some personal preference for some other folks, but he's definitely up there for me. I do not see what everyone else is seeing. This is kind of like Green Book to me, where I understand that there's some impressive stuff happening, either in front of the lens or behind it, but there's no way that it's my best picture of the year, and it's not even in the conversation for me. So take that for what you will. I have heard some folks kind of compare this to not being a war movie so much as like a journey movie. And maybe I can see the merit for that as a journey, but the screenplay beats of seeing a baby in a drawer, of speaking to a woman and giving her the food that you just so happen to stumble across, of conveniently dying from an airplane after you get the milk that the baby needs. Narratively, it is one of the weakest plot points stitched together that I've seen all year. I wish I had something positive to say. But.
Yeah, I am just kind of shocked that people haven't responded to the story in the way that they have, direction aside, because of just how contrived some of it feels to me. Just to like name some specifics, since we've mostly been kind of big picture so far, when they're in this covered trench and one of the soldiers has just been buried because of a booby trap, and on their way running out of this tunnel, they have to jump a hole of some kind, right?
A mine trench.
Right. It really is just so cliche and lazy for, a critic to say it feels like an amusement park ride, but that is exactly what it felt like to me. It just felt like an Indiana Jones ride, right? Where you're not, I did not feel like I was in this scene. I definitely felt like I was in my cart swiveling and the camera is telling me where to look because one animatronic character is going to be jumping over a hole here and I need to be sure to catch that. And it just feels so without spontaneity. And I just think that makes it kind of boring for me when I feel like there's really no sense of chance.
which is weird because it is supposed to feel like a one take. And I know that I'm on the record as not liking Long Day's Journey into Night, but the thing that is so cool about its one take shot is that there are absolutely mistakes in that one take, and they had to go with the improvisations as they were, and they had to adjust on the fly. And I don't know what those are, but I know they're there. There's no way they're not there. And I get the impression from this film that there's almost none of those, and if there are any, they're boring and not artistic, or they don't add more character to the film. They're not beauty marks. They're not even blemishes. They're things I don't notice because it's so overproduced.
Yeah, I mean, the long take in Long Day's Journey into Night, which I do think keeps coming up in this conversation since it is like the one big other long take like of the year. Has things that just feel like they could have gone so differently, right? Like a trick pool shot, or the horse that kind of panics when someone approaches it. Like, it just feels like at any moment this might veer off into a different direction, whereas in 1917, where we see, you know, a dogfight between a couple planes and one starts coming toward them, it just feels so predetermined. I just know exactly where that plane is going. And then shortly thereafter, when we lose one of our characters and the camera is kind of swirling around him, that just feels so in conflict with what that scene means. Just kind of icky for me. I don't like it. I'm curious to talk to more people about it and see the extent to which the appreciation is first and foremost for the technical brio versus the narrative, which I feel like is so kind of Bond style. James Bond, you know, here's your objective. Go complete it.
But it doesn't have any of the charm of Bond.
Oh yeah,
not just
I wouldn't
Bond,
say it's a good
but the
Bond
film.
movie.
Yeah, Well, let me ask you a really hard question. This is a hard-hitting question that we normally ask on the show. What's your favorite scene, Michael?
That is a tough question. You're right. There isn't much that I really
There's that great nighttime scene where the city's on fire, and the fire's very clearly shitty CGI fire that totally destroyed anything that I had going for me in that scene.
That your least favorite?
It's a runner-up for about 90 other shots that I don't care for.
What would my favorite... I don't think I have one. I do not think I have a favorite scene.
I do have one.
Okay.
It's when they spend a little bit of time on Kenneth Branagh talking into the camera. And it's not because it's well shot, it's just because it's nice to spend time with like a really, really, really competent actor delivering lines almost perfectly. It was just like a refreshing glass of fresh milk in the middle of a film that I have nothing other good things to say about.
Should we leave it at that? 1917, directed by Sam Mendes.
Let's leave it at that and mutter a wish that it does not win Best Picture. We'll be right back after this sponsorship break. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Podcorn.
Podcorn takes the pain out of finding and sponsoring on-demand audio shows. They make it easy for brands to connect to the right podcasters to create authentic messages that resonate and engage listeners across audio platforms.
With Podcorn, there is no middleman. Podcasts of all size can browse and choose sponsorship opportunities right on the platform, set their own rates, and collaborate with brands directly without any exclusivities. You never give up any rights to your podcast, and Podcorn is there to support you every step of the way. Michael hadn't seen Podcorn before, and I showed him in about 3 minutes how to log in and how to review the entire site.
That's right. Today was my first time using it, and it was indeed ridiculously easy to use.
Click the link in our show note to sign up to Podcorn and start browsing sponsorship opportunities today. The Naked Kiss from Samuel Fuller.
The Naked Kiss. A motion picture not for the squeamish, but powerful entertainment for those who enjoy reality in the raw.
When I came to this town, I was a prostitute. Next morning, I quit.
We pivoted to this title at the last second last week, and this is my favorite film of the episode. Where are you at on The Naked Kiss, Michael?
Oh, I really like this film. In case folks are wondering why we went with Sam Fuller's The Naked Kiss this week, our next title will be The Steel Helmet.
No, that's not why. We went with it because his first name is Sam, and 1917 is directed by Sam Mendes.
Whoa, I had not thought about that connection.
I just came up with it. How you like that?
But yeah, I liked The Naked Kiss a great deal. This is a 1964 film. It is a neo-noir with some flashes
reversal.
With some flashes of red-hot melodrama, which I very much liked. It's set in a small town America suburb. It is about a prostitute named Kelly, just Kelly. I don't think we ever get a last name.
We do not.
Who arrives by bus and very promptly sleeps with a police officer.
She's a saleswoman, and she sells him angel foam. It just so happens that angel foam also means that she's a prostitute who slept with this officer.
Very discreet. She sleeps with the police officer, wakes up the following morning, and decides to ditch her trade. Tries to go
She goes to the other side of the river, where he recommends, and she's actually looking for the woman Candy that she was recommended to go find when she stumbles upon the open room by the seamstress. And then she goes in there to rent the room, and she gets the 4-post bed with its 4 angels, and starts her life anew. I don't think it was as premeditated as you just made it sound. I got the sense that it was a little bit more off the cuff. Did you feel differently?
I did. I think that shot of her looking at herself in the mirror was this moment of reflection, right?
Yes. Yeah, that too. But I definitely felt it come together in that seamstress's home. I guess that's where I felt the empathetic transference. I definitely felt like the character had a realization, but I didn't get the sense that the world could allow her change until she entered that area.
Yeah, I think I'm good with that. Yeah, to me there are a couple beats. She wakes up, she realizes she doesn't want to wake up in places like this anymore, and then she is fortunate enough to find somewhere else to go, which is a seamstress who is just lovely.
Yes.
Her house, and sets up shop there. And I thought this movie was great. It was so different from what I was expecting. I did watch The Steel Helmet first.
Me too.
So this was a pivot in certain ways that I was not expecting. I like the seediness of it. Just the boldness of it. It's very outre and proud of it. I think it's very scathing and intent on kind of exposing some of these hypocrisies of American suburbia. I am very positive on it. What about you?
I agree. During this film, I kind of thought around a few pillars. First and foremost is Samuel Fuller, to me, as a storyteller, is operating in the same space that I think of Lenny Bruce having operated, addressing the truth that is uncomfortable constantly, without any sense of backing down, and so sharp, but also so eloquent and beautiful in it. I also thought of George Carlin, who picked up Lenny Bruce's, flag and waved it on into, the coming decades. And then I thought, surprisingly, and maybe you'll push back on this, a lot about Paul Schrader And Samuel Fuller's storytelling to me seems very in line with Paul Schrader's storytelling. He creates these abrasive main characters who go on to illustrate uncomfortable truths about the world that the director or screenwriter, in Paul Schrader's case, might have some misgivings about and is working out internally. And I just see them as operating in very similar storytelling timelines.
I think I could see that. I probably get that more from the Steel Helmet for sure than the Naked Kiss, right? Where so much of the action, as we'll talk about, plays out in this house of worship, which I think just gives everything this kind of spiritual feel. I can see that.
I think the one that I'd point to with this film would be Hardcore, which is something you haven't yet seen. I know Hardcore does have a male main character, but it's the point of the seedy underbelly of LA and the point of the seedy underbelly of every town in America and what a traveling saleswoman means. And what, something as innocent as Angel Foam champagne being bought means. And then, these rich people that we trust are actually, pedophiles, raping children. There's just, to me, there's a great relationship there between Hardcore and this film.
Yeah. I think I could see it. To me, I haven't seen enough Paul Schrader to really say one way or the other, right? I've seen Mishima, First Reformed.
Yeah, and I'd point towards those two and the Steel Helmet pretty quickly.
To me, they're both just like so polished and, in their transcendental style, which is very different to me than the sort of scruffy kind of genre approach of Fuller. But, I think I see the thematic connections.
Yeah. And I think it would be less scruffy if Fuller told stories now. I think because he was constrained by that studio system and what I can imagine is not a big budget. Gosh, what he does is really impressive to me.
Yeah. I thought a lot about Blue Velvet. And, how that's all about sort of exposing this seedy underbelly of suburbia. And that's what Fuller's doing here. He's almost just kind of, showing it as right there on the surface in a way. You think of that first shot, Blue Velvet, where you're watching these like ridiculously artificial stagings of a guy watering his lawn and the fireman on the fire truck waving at you. And there are scenes here that feel highly ironic to me in a similar way in showing this sort of Pleasantville-ish suburban setting with some really gross things right there beneath the surface, and what is criticized as deviant and what kind of goes unseen. And it also is just a great noir, right? It just looks good with all the light and shadow you could want. Great dialogue. There's that line about she's talking to the guy who she's hoping to settle down with, and he says something about her interest in poetry. She says, or he says, that's just, I wish I could remember the line word for word, but it's something about poetry in the age of missiles.
Yes.
That's a great line. That's poetry.
Yes. With this film, there's a lot of things, but I think the most impressive is the original song that has all the children singing on it, as well as our main actress, who I looked up about 4 times during the film, and I still forget her name right now. But she's extremely talented, and I believe actually began her career as a singer before she became an actress. And she still has a career. She's still alive, but definitely slowing down.
Yeah. Actress's name is Constance Towers.
And I was thinking, it's not Constance Wu, it's Constance. Is it even Constance?
Yeah, she's good. She has a couple of scenes where she goes to town on different people. Right? In the opening scene where she's beating the crap out of some guy who we kind of learn later who exactly he is.
Her pimp.
I didn't know. Did you know that right away? That wasn't exactly clear to me.
As soon as he said in the jail, I was her business manager.
Oh, yeah.
That's when I knew it was her
clear.
pimp. Yeah,
I wasn't sure.
I had no idea until that was said.
Okay, me neither. I wasn't sure. Maybe we were supposed to have picked up on that somehow. It felt like a reveal to me.
Yeah. No, it definitely felt like a reveal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, and I like the music. I think, there are some switches from that real hot, fiery jazz to the orchestral that really just seems to suggest the two different sides of this place, right? The deviance and then that sort of facade of suburban bliss. It's just that's just kind of fun, and at the same time, it's all very pulpy, pulpy.
But somehow the facade of suburban bliss doesn't feel completely fake. There's one scene where, and it's, I think, the final happy scene that we ever get to see, where she's taking her dress out of the seamstress's house. And the seamstress is saying farewell to her, and she's going up on the porch, and then she's walking on the sidewalk past these girls playing jump rope, and then a little boy riding a tricycle. And it's kind of a long take shot that's really impressive. But it felt real, in a way that, not like this is permanent, but like this is one of those beautiful singular moments of bliss in your life that you can just kind of remember how happy that moment was. And this film has one of those. And to me, it didn't ring entirely empty. I believe that she was that happy as I was witnessing her in that moment before everything went to hell.
Yeah, I think this is, for as ironic as a lot of it feels, I think it is often sincere when it's looking at the children, like in the sequence where they sing this song together, when they're recording it, and we get these close-ups of each kid one after the next.
Yeah.
That only makes it like really sting and that much more repulsive when you discover what this wealthy guy is doing. And it's revealed that he's a pedophile. It does seem to express real concern for these kids, obviously. Yeah. That is not the subject of its derision or contempt at all. It's definitely more geared towards the adults. And these are the unsuspecting victims in a very real way.
Yeah. But the kids in this film are the ones that have the harshest realities, the ones that are the most honest, and the ones that are the most courageous, I would say. That's not dismissing Kelly, but other than Kelly, very few characters showed courage. There was one woman who was given $1,000 by Kelly to not have an abortion. And that woman did show courage, but she had very brief screen time. Most of the adults in this film did not have courage, whereas most of the children, because of the nature of the children in this film, did have courage. And I think that we'll see that repeating theme come up again in Steel Helmet. And I think I'd be very interested to see the rest of his entire filmography, because he definitely says something that I agree with about the nature of youth and its bounty for life.
Yeah, definitely something about the innocence of youth.
But also its strength and its compassion and forgiveness. There's something very stirring to me about his depiction there.
Yeah, I would agree. Additional thoughts? Should we move on?
Favorite scene before we move on?
I really like the opening. I think in a way it feels similar to the opening to Steel Helmet to me, that we're just suddenly kind of thrown into this uncomfortable situation and we're going to figure out who it is that we're watching as we go. And I love the jazz in that scene that's so, fiery and hot. I like it. I'll go with that. What about you?
Mine is less stylized on the back end and more just about letting Constance do an impressive thing with a great child performer. It's when the main little boy with the defined buck teeth gets his new legs, and she kind of plays a stern maternal figure who makes him walk on them and touch his toes. The way that Sam gives a close-up on her face, and how it just dynamically shifts during that whole process, was just great. It was Hitchcockian. It was everything that a close-up should be, and it was masterful in something that didn't have any weight, but has all of the weight of the world, because it is a little kid learning how to live a normal life, and that this is the figure who can teach him that is, it's special. It was just a special scene. I really liked it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see her in those hospital scenes where I was almost expecting, if this had been a more, if this maybe had been a studio film in some world, we would maybe see more kind of maternal instincts come out. You get that a bit, but she's also kind of tough. Like,
yes,
she
very
has some
tough. She's
love.
very tough.
And it's not the, sort of goddess-like mother figure that I think cinema often can turn, can often show that a woman has become in some sort of redemption arc. He lets her remain tough, even though she wants to go straight and maybe chase this American dream in some way. She's going to do it, but she's going to remain who she is, which is great. I like that a lot.
And everybody was the benefit of it in that town. On to the Steel Helmet.
You ballerinas smoke cigars?
I got a box in my pack.
Oh, yeah? What kind?
I don't know. I don't smoke. I just found them.
I'll see you as far as the temple for the stogies. Know where it is? Let's go.
The Steel Helmet. A man is handcuffed on a hill, peeking over it. His bullet hole steel helmet just peeking above that ridge. This is how the film opens up. This is a great film. What do you think about this film, Michael?
I really liked this film. I think this had popped up on your radar after Martin Scorsese's op-ed in the New York Times about the state of cinema, more or less.
Correct.
This was one of a handful of titles that he expressed a great deal of affection for.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a great deal of affection for it as well. I thought this was great. It's tough and gritty. It's a Korean War movie.
That's a lot to say.
It certainly does. It's low budget. I think it feels very real to me. It's not always like super realistic. I think
you certainly are on movie lots.
Yeah. But it is quite unblinking in its eye towards the, tough realities of war. I think it has a great cast, led by Gene Evans, who plays Sergeant Zach, the soldier you described in the opening scene.
A surly individual who is also a veteran of World War II and stormed the beaches on D-Day.
That's right. It's efficient. It's only 85 minutes long. I think it's very economically directed. It's realistic, but I like that it has some style too, especially once we get to the Buddhist temple where most of this movie is set. The soldier you described goes on to join up with this kind of motley crew of other U.S. soldiers, all sort of weary on their way towards a Buddhist temple where they're going to be setting up a post of some kind. I really liked it. What about you overall?
I also I adore it. I agree with everything you said, but I would add that there's a lot more going on under the surface. There's a conversation about racism in America. There's a conversation about religion in America. There's a conversation about PTSD and the effects of trauma in a war situation, and paternalism and the beauty of children. There's a lot of different hats being juggled, or themes and points, and this is one of those things that made me think not only of Mishima, Life in 4 Chapters, but also of First Reformed, particularly the repeating shot of the Buddha. I don't quite know what to do other than to think about stop, because the hand is being held up, and we keep going to that. The idea of stop, and then stop what? Fighting, stop going to war on foreign soil, stop needless bloodshed, stop what? Right, because the Korean War isn't necessarily needless bloodshed. It did liberate a people, and now you know what North Korea is, so is the alternate reality of not doing that better? There's a lot of stuff in this film, and I don't know how to unpack it other than great appreciation, and I loved it.
Yeah, I agree, and I like that it really kind of leaves that to us to contemplate most of the time when we're watching these soldiers in the temple. They're kind of going about their business, but then the camera will just stop to look at that gigantic Buddha that's in the middle of it. Also, these kind of smaller statues that are in the different rooms they go in. They explicitly talk about race. I don't remember. They might explicitly talk about, spirituality in some way or another, but it definitely feels like that's,
the prayer is kind of under the surface because the little boy is writing the prayers. And then at one point, our main character, his prayer is the name that he calls the boy on a pendant.
Yeah. To me, it definitely just felt like in war, nothing is sacred. Anything is fair game, anywhere, anytime. A life can be taken, just with the snap of the fingers. No matter whether you're in the battlefield or in a house of worship.
Yeah.
It just makes it seem all that more kind of unthinkable. But yeah, I like the cast too. The actor who plays our lead Sergeant Gene Evans, is just so gruff and hardened, and I think part of this is about how unfeeling these soldiers are left by war.
Yeah, I mean, he's wounded by a good bullet the entire time, and it's never addressed.
Yeah, he has a limp for
and the wound is bleeding and tied the entire film.
He's a tough dude. Yeah. But it doesn't feel to me like it is in any way romanticizing the machismo, of this crew.
It's
whatsoever.
the opposite of that.
And that this guy does, somewhat open up to this young South Korean boy who he journeys with through most of the film, who he ultimately loses. I think it just, goes to show why he in the first place is so hardened, and how what you risk when you do open up in war, and how just not an option that is if you want to stay sane, if you can stay sane in war, which I don't think you can.
Yeah, and I think there's something more specific undergirding that.
To me, it's first and foremost just a war movie about the horror of war and how hardened it leaves people, and how closed off they become, and how it's not romantic, it's not glorious, it's awful.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
It's gory, it's at times kind of funny because of the errors that are captured by the camera during a particular night shootout where they are killing some Koreans who are in the trees shooting them. We hear a bunch of gunfire, and one of our characters is actually not even pulling his trigger, but his gun is proceeding to kill someone who's in a tree. There's a lot happening.
And beyond our lead, I think the cast is interesting, how he distinguishes them from each other without, just doling out traits to differentiate them. And I think it's the filmmaking and the kind of honesty of it.
Surviving and taking care of this group of men and helping this young boy who's gone bald fix his baldness by rubbing dirt on his head.
Yeah, that was interesting to me because when we first see that kid bald, it's during the gunfight in the jungle. Like, we see him hit the deck and his helmet falls off, and we see that he's bald.
Yeah, that's right.
And then it's like a scene later when the gunfight has ended that Zach knocks his helmet off, I think, or takes his helmet off, and he realizes he's bald. So we've already discovered that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just like the more conventional approach would be that like we learn when Zach learns, since we're kind of following him, which to me the language there is just kind of reiterating that we're kind of observing Zach. We're not necessarily in his shoes. We're now watching him kind of discover things. There's some interesting choices there. Like another one that was kind of interesting to me was when they discover the body of another American soldier just like along the road.
Mm-hmm. And he says not to.
He says, don't worry about it. It's just a dead body. A dead body doesn't mean anything. And then you cut to the soldier who he's talking to, and it's up the back of his head rather than his face. Like you would just expect the reaction shot of him being sort of appalled or something like that. I don't even know what to make of it. It's just an interesting shot to me where we kind of know what that reaction looks like. It sort of leaves that to our imagination.
But it also, I think, is a little bit of a foreshadowing to this is just another dead soldier
that
he's talking to. So the face doesn't matter.
That in some ways, these in the end are faceless soldiers who die for bad reasons.
And what happens is a soldier's tasked to go down there and get the dog tags from the body, and it's a booby-trapped dead body, and that person is exploded with lots of detail on the camera, a amount that I had not expected to see in a film at this era.
Yeah. And it's just a efficient movie. I think it just moves right along. I think the action's pretty well staged, even though if it's not all even if it's not all convincing, I think it is kind of in exciting in a way that doesn't, champion it in any way, obviously.
No, and it's internally logical. Even though things don't quite look real, it all fits within its own scope. So you can kind of just suspend disbelief and go for the ride.
Yeah. I think one of the things Fuller said was that the only way to make a real anti-war movie would be if you, during the screening of the movie, occasionally shot some bullets out into the auditorium, which I think there's something to, but I think he comes pretty darn close to making an anti-war movie here without making it too exhilarating.
Yeah, I think he makes a pro-human film. Mm-hmm. And other caveats I would have to spend a lot of time thinking about.
Yeah. Favorite scene?
Favorite scene? Boy. My favorite scene in this film is probably when the little boy goes to write a new prayer inside of the temple. It's not for any particular reason other than the earnestness of the shot and the belief in the boy of the goodness of these men, of Zach, and of him. It's a touching scene that it's not as cool as the opening shot, but it's beautiful. How about you?
I do like that kid. I like the scene during the final fight when Zach has that kind of shell-shocked reaction, and he's I think he was on the ground and he slowly stands up and is completely in a daze.
Mm-hmm.
And it's partly extra textual because I had heard that was partly the inspiration for shots in Raging Bull, where it's not De Niro's character, but the opposite boxer who, has just suffered a blow and is standing up in a complete daze with like the steam of the heat of the ring kind of rising up around him. And now I can't get those images out of my head. So that was a good shot.
That is a great scene. I really liked this movie. I loved Naked Kiss. Which one's your favorite out of these Fuller films?
Probably The Naked Kiss. What about you?
Same.
Good pick.
Run! Go! Get
We have to go.
I'm coming with you.
That was brilliant.
And that's another one in the can.